Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the best and somewhat less best performances of Elgar's Violin Concerto. I've been saving up for this one. I really have, because I've got 24 performances here, which aren't everything that's ever been recorded in this work, but it's pretty close. I've only left out, I think, a scant handful, let's put it that way. And really, this is, in some ways, the greatest of all romantic violin concertos. And I don't say that lightly. It's huge, first of all. It really lasts normally around between 45 and 50 minutes. 47 to 50 is more typical. And it can go as long as 55 and as little as 40 and a bit. I mean, it has a huge range, but it's an extraordinary virtuoso piece that at the same time is incredibly inward and intimate and passionate. It's got everything. It really does. It's gorgeously written. Elgar was a violinist. It's very violin-y, sort of, more or less. I read comments about the work that talk about the proximate influence being the Brahms Violin Concerto, which is just total nonsense. It doesn't sound anything like the Brahms Violin Concerto. In fact, the influence is really very obvious when you think about it. It's the Dvorak Cello Concerto. Dvorak influenced Elgar in many, many ways. Elgar played under Dvorak, actually. So they had that sort of connection, and everyone wants to pick, the most impressive model to boost the reputation of the less well-known model, but this just isn't going to wash. The Dvorak Cello Concerto is in B minor. The Elgar Violin Concerto is in B minor. Very strange key for a violin concerto. It really is. It's quite rare. But more than that, you have at the end of the finale of the Dvorak a lengthy coda, which is effectively an accompanied cadenza for the soloist, which slowly ruminates quietly and intimately on the previous themes of the concerto and brings back the tunes from the prior movements. That's exactly what happens in the finale of the Elgar, although it's on a much bigger scale. Because the piece, like I said, it's actually very beautifully balanced. The finale and the first movement both run around 18-ish minutes usually, whereas the slow movement runs between 10 and 12 normally. And so it's really just a beautifully proportioned piece, even though it's epically long and ferociously difficult for the soloist. And because of that, because of its reputation for difficulty, most soloists do not play it unless they're really up to it. Most recordings are done by people who know it either from the point of view of the soloist or the point of view of the conductor. I mean, know it meaning have a lot of experience or work with it before they bring it into the studio, fortunately. And that's really necessary because the piece is fully symphonic and it requires a conductor and orchestra who are totally engaged. It requires intimate contact between the soloist and the conductor all the time. There's a lot of speeding up and slowing down and tricky passages that have to be synchronized. You need a conductor who can really characterize the orchestral part because the piece really does require two people, two characters to interact with each other. And so the more forthcoming the conductor and the orchestra are, the more exciting the solo part is going to be. And the fewer dead spots you're going to encounter, because anything that long can have those. And we don't want dead spots, do we? Nothing like that. So, like I said, we're going to go through God knows how many performances here. And we'll talk about the ones that are really, really great and the ones that are really less great, but most of them are really good. You're very lucky when you're dealing with the Elgar Concerto, and some violinists have done it more than once, so you can pick and choose. The essential quality for me in the soloist is, can they characterize? Do they have a recognizable sound, a recognizable personality? Do they have the technical aptitude for the work to make it sound easy? Does it flow the way it has to flow? All of these things, they matter a lot, but you want to have a soloist that has personality, because Elgar posted a superscription. Aquí está encerrada el alma de ... In other words, here is enshrined the soul of, and of course he doesn't tell us who the soul of is, But what matters is that it's a person. It's a thing. It's a personality. It's a thing. It's an emotional world that he's expressing in this amazing work. Now, it was written originally for Fritz Kreisler. Fritz Kreisler is, of course, the king of continuous vibrato, so we know where Elgar stood on that score, don't we? And Fritz Kreisler adored the work and adored Elgar, but he did not record it. And he didn't record it because he didn't want to record it with Elgar as the conductor, interestingly enough. And by the time Elgar was out of the way, so was Fritz Kreisler, effectively. And so there is no recording of Fritz Kreisler doing the piece. There are recordings going back to Elgar himself. And so we're going to have to deal with those. First and foremost, let us deal in rough chronological order with some of the more historical recordings, and we'll talk about those first. One of the problems, I just want to say before we get to those, is that until very recently, really the past couple of decades, this piece was owned by certain English conductors and violinists. The conductors still largely do own it, actually, the English conductors. But it was almost impossible to get a sensible feel for the piece if you weren't English, because the English critics of the press would just destroy you if you touched this piece. And it was, the immortal performance of, violinist blah and conductor blah, like that sort of thing, and there was no way to compete. But nowadays, with violinists looking to capture unusual or less known repertoire, to promote pieces that haven't been heard as frequently, to take the stage for an entire half of a concert, it's become a real international piece, which is great. At least on disc it has. And I think that's just marvelous, because it really deserves to be. It deserves to be as popular as any other violin concerto. But you have to get there, and you have to get past the old boy network. And I think it's sort of gotten there, at least on disc. As I look at it, it has. Not that the English critics will admit it, but it really sort of has. So that's a good thing. Now let's talk about these old historical recordings. The most famous, of course, is Elgar's own with the young teenage Yehudi Menuhin. It should have been Kreisler, but it wasn't. So Elgar got Menuhin out of the crib and said, "Come on, boy, let's do it." And they did it. Now, it's very important that we understand what the timings were in this recording, because they do kind of set the stage for everything that's come before. Timings are always tricky in classical music. I mean, they don't matter more than, for example, phrasing and proportion and shaping and those things. And that's particularly true in Elgar, because you can find pieces that have the same timing in Elgar, but wildly different fluctuations of tempo within those timings, because Elgar is constantly speeding up and slowing down, and nowhere more so than here. So there's a warning there. But in gross terms, it's helpful. So this performance, which is a marvelous performance, although it's recorded in, 1932 sound, which is, awful. Let's not kid ourselves. It's 17 minutes and 30 seconds for the first movement, 13 minutes and 8 seconds for the slow movement, which is actually a little on the slow side, I think. And then finally, the finale is 19 minutes and 27 seconds, which is also a little bit on the slow side. Now, Elgar was usually quite brisk with his tempi in his own music and unsentimental, but not here. Elgar himself said the piece is too emotional. I love it anyway. But he took his time, and he allowed the soloist to take their time. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. So this is that, and it's a classic, and I know, but you've got to put up with 1932 rather dim sonics, and the violin is well captured. You can hear the piece. It's not like inaudible. It's not bad in that sense, but it takes some getting used to. So after Elgar's own came another English violinist, Albert Salmons, who was a wonderful violinist, and he recorded it right here with Malcolm Sargent and the Liverpool Philharmonic. No, it was with the New Queen's Hall. Sorry, the New Queen's Hall Orchestra under Henry Wood. The Delius is with Sargent and Liverpool. That's coupled on this Naxos CD, as the Elgar, the Menuhin one here is also, it's on EMI and it's on a bunch of things. This is the Naxos version of it, because it's like old and public domain, basically. So this one is really quick. It's 43 minutes for the whole thing. The Elgar is about 50, maybe a little longer, 51 or something. You've got 14:51 for the first movement, 11 minutes for the slow movement, which is 2 minutes quicker, and then only 16, 17 minutes and a bit for the finale. So about 3 minutes faster. And the differences are not as much as you'd think. Because like I said, there's so much internal contrast that, you could find that a quicker performance could be quite a bit duller than a slower performance. It all depends on how it's proportioned. Anyway, this is a splendid performance. The only problem I have with it is that Salmon's is really insensitive in that gorgeous accompanied cadenza in the finale. I mean, the cadenza it's about 5 or 6 minutes long. It's long, it's mostly slow, mostly very inward. Elgar marks it meticulously. He invented for this cadenza a new sonority, a pizzicato tremolando, where the violinists thrum the strings like a guitarist would, practically, but quietly, to create this beautiful, gauzy, but alive sonority. And he plays with this and with all kinds of ponticello and mutes and things and whatnot to make the accompaniment, which is very, very soft, infinitely varied. And it's wonderful to be able to hear that. But more than that, the soloist has to be very conscious of what's happening in the background, even though the soloist has the front and center attention the whole way. And I find Salmon's to be too much of a virtuoso soloist. And it could be partly the sonics. It could be. I mean, this was recorded in, also the dawn of time. When was this thing? 1929. It's even earlier than Elgar's own recording. And so I could really understand how some people could find this to be a little bit insensitive. But boy, it's an exciting performance. It's really very good. So, you have to be aware of that one, what I consider to be deficit. But there are no reservations when it comes to the quickest of all performances in the history of the universe. I think, is it a little bit the quickest of all? Yes, it is. It is quickest. It's Heifetz. Of course, it's Heifetz. It's Heifetz not because he was insensitive or too fast, but because he just could play the pants off of anything. And he didn't need to slow down to be expressive. And he doesn't. And it's wonderful. So it's let's see, this one is with Malcolm Sargent. There we go. I knew he showed up somewhere. With the London Symphony from 1949. So the sound is pretty good. I mean, it's perfectly listenable mono. Some people ignore this performance completely because of its quickness. Again, I don't hear the quickness particularly. I hear flow. I hear connection and technical, violin playing of a technical level that's just insane, unbelievable. It deserves more attention than it gets. It deserves more serious indulgence than it's gotten, particularly from my colleagues on the other side of the Atlantic. But it is really quite extraordinary and definitely worth hearing. So Heifetz is a thing. He's definitely a thing. Then we've got a bunch of things in boxes. I mean, the Elgar violin concertos often come clumped. They come clumped with other Elgar things or in Elgar collections. And so you're going to hear them, if you get a box of Elgar, you get the violin concerto rather than just the violin concerto, which actually almost fills up a whole CD anyway by itself. But this is Kyung Hwa Chung with Georg Solti. Another very interesting performance. We were talking about this in the comments section. Solti paid attention to Elgar's own recordings of these works. And so he was rather swift where Elgar was swift, and he was rather relaxed where Elgar was relaxed, as he is in the violin concerto. It's a beautiful performance, and Chung is such a wonderful, warm, sensual violinist. I love her sound. It's really lovely. And so it's definitely worth considering if you get this box. This is the Edward Elgar British Music Collection on Decca, which doesn't exist anymore. I mean, Decca does, but this box is long out of print. But, it's in the Chung box. There's boxes and boxes and places where you can still find it. And it's definitely worth hearing, for sure. It's a very good performance. So that's one of the big boxy things. I have to figure out where this came from and where I'm going to put it back. Oh, I'll put it over there. Why not? Next, in the boxes, we have the Charles Groves box. Now, Charles Groves did a recording of the Elgar Concerto with Hugh Bean. Hugh Bean was a first-class violinist, but a local talent, particularly in the UK. And he made a bunch of records, principally of chamber music. He was the concertmaster or leader, as they say in the UK, of the Philharmonia for all of those Klemperer recordings. There's no question he knew the work and could play the violin, and Groves is such a wonderful conductor. This is a lovely performance to really get the give and take between the soloist and the conductor and the orchestra. It's just a beautifully collegial performance. It works wonderfully, wonderfully well, and it's beautifully recorded by EMI, and it's in the Groves box. So if you got the Groves box, you're going to get this. I don't know if you have to go out of your way to get it separately unless you collect the work, but I made a big deal out of the Groves box because it's just phenomenal. And so that's definitely worth having for that reason. Another box of Elgar things is this one. This is Adrian Bolt, of course. Now, he recorded the Elgar Concerto at least 3 times with different people. 2 of them are in here, and we're only going to talk about one because I have the other one here on Testament. We'll get to it in a minute, but it's also in this box you should be aware of. This is the other Menuhin recording. Menuhin remade it later. A lot of people insist it's not as good as his first one when he was fresh and young and had no technical issues. I don't think he has many technical issues in his remake. It's a beautiful performance, but it's not as characterful, I think, as some of the others out there. I mean, no one's going to complain from hearing it, I don't think, and there's no question that God knows Menuhin had authority in the work. So it's quite wonderful. The tempos are not so different from Elgar's own. Maybe it's a little bit quicker, maybe a tad. You can look it up. Let's not look it up. It doesn't matter. But it's fine. It's like most performances of this work. You're dealing with interpreters who have such authority in the music that, quibbles are just those. They're quibbles. Maybe, depending on, what you personally prefer for certain spots or certain movements. So, so there's Menuhin and Bolt. Now, here is a wonderful example of the Elgar Concerto breaking free of the British classical music ghetto. This is really fun. I got such a kick out of this. It's wonderful. It's the complete Elgar music for violin, including the concerto. You also get the serenade for strings, and then all the short pieces that he arranged for violin or things that he wrote for violin and piano, these sort of, it's really kind of unbelievable. It features, are you ready for this? Violinist Marat Bisengaliev with the West Kazakhstan Philharmonic Orchestra under Bundit Ungrangzi. I have no idea if I pronounced any of that correctly. It's on Naxos. It's a 3-disc set. Kind of amazing that this is where that's coming from, isn't it? And the Violin Concerto is off really good. Now, the West Kazakhstan Philharmonic is not the greatest orchestra in the world. There are better, more compelling versions of the orchestral part, but the violin playing is very strong. And it's just, look, it's not going to be nobody's first choice. You're getting this because of the complete set. But you got to give everybody involved credit for turning in a really effective performance that it does everybody proud. It really does. I was shocked, and happily shocked, happily so. So, there you go. If you want to hear what the West Kazakhstan Philharmonic sounds like, this is your chance. And, they're infinitely better than the South Kazakhstan Philharmonic. And, they're about on the same level as the Northwest Kazakhstan Philharmonic. It's all sort of the same. Then we have a recording that was, what label was this originally on? A Collins Classics. That's right. The Collins Classics version with Salvatore Accardo and Richard Hickox with the London Symphony. Really, it's quite a lovely performance. I like Accardo. I really do. I liked his Sibelius Concerto very much. I loved his Paganini concertos. He was one of those, he was a musician of great taste and refinement and class. And everything he played had that. It was all scrupulously well-turned and I think lovely. And this version of the Elgar is not, huge on weeping and moaning. It's not the most passionate version out there. It's extremely clean and clear and nicely balanced. And Hickox, again, he's sort of similar as a conductor. He evolved as a conductor. This was earlier in his career. And I think that the performance itself is fresh and lively and very appealing. But again, it's probably not going to be anybody's first choice. This is on alto, but you do get the piano concerto, which Elgar never wrote. There's a slow movement for piano and orchestra here, and bits of the Crown of India and Polonia, the symphonic prelude, which is a big bombastic piece of, schlock for 12 minutes and 47 seconds. Lots of fun. Lots of fun. This is a reissue on the alto label, and it's good that they have it. So that's that one. And now we're going to get to some of the more heavy hitters in the Elgar sweepstakes. There are some of them and some less heavy hitters, but a lot of them here. Pinchas Zuckerman. Now, Pinchas Zuckerman did it twice. This is his first one with Daniel Barenboim and the London Philharmonic. I do not find it to be as persuasive as his second one, which we will get to anon very shortly. It's a fine performance. I mean, Barenboim was a notable Elgarian. He still is. Zuckerman certainly had feeling for the work. My problem with this performance, quite simply, is that the remastered sonics don't do his tone justice. He has a lovely tone. He really has a nice dusky tone. And this performance makes him sound a little edgy. There's a little bit of glare on the violin tone that just bothered me in large quantities. And because you're going to be listening to it for 50 minutes, it's hard to judge the performance when the sonics are a little bit subpar, as I feel they are here. It's a shame, because the performance itself is quite beautiful. You can tell it's a very fine performance, but it's not the easiest one to listen to, in my view. So I put that one aside as sort of a not quite there. Then we get this one that everyone screamed and yelled and shrieked about. This was Nigel Kennedy, when his name was Nigel Kennedy. He remade this concerto just under the name of Kennedy or something like that, with Simon Rattle in the city of Birmingham. That was slower and duller than this one, which had Vernon Handley, who was much more alert and more conspicuously idiomatic Elgarian than Simon Rattle was, despite the fact that Simon Rattle's recorded it like 3 times. More on that shortly. Anyway, this performance is on the slowish side. It's slower than Elgar's. You've got a 21-minute and 36-second finale, and almost 19 minutes for the first movement, and over 13 for the slow movement. But it's very, very beautifully played. It really is. I mean, everybody knows what they're doing, and it's with the London Phil, which is like the Elgar Orchestra, and it deserved its acclaim when it came out. But it will challenge those who prefer a little more fleetness over certain sections of it. It really. It's beautiful, though. It's held up very well. And it's certainly superior to the remake, which I just find to be flabby. Just flabby and uninteresting. Kennedy was better when he had 2 names, Nigel and Kennedy. I don't know what he's going by now. Maybe he shortened it even more now. It's just like Ken or something. Who knows? D. But this was one of the ones that the British press had an orgasm over, as you might expect. And as far as I know, they're still having one over it. Next, we get the other Adrian Bolt version I mentioned with Ida Handel. This is the slowest recording ever. It's 55 minutes and 20 seconds. It's really, really slow. My goodness. And, I love Ida Handel. She's a wonderful violinist. I mean, the timings here are just going to blow your mind. It's almost 20 minutes for the first movement, the same as the Nigel Kennedy, 21 minutes and 39 seconds for the finale, and 13 minutes and 49 seconds for the slow movement, which is one of the slowest one of those. It's lovely, lovely, lovely playing. And, Bolt is a nice guy. He's with her 100% of the way. If you're curious, if you're a connoisseur of the work, you're probably going to want to hear this. Because she's a smart violinist. She knows what she's doing. She really does. But it's a bit of a haul. 55 minutes in this piece is really pushing it. So be forewarned. Next, this is the other Naxos one, which is also surprisingly good. It's with Dong-Suk Kang, violin, and the Polish National Radio Symphony Orchestra, which is a very, very good orchestra, under Adrian Leeper. It also has the Kokenia Overture. There's a recoupling of this with the Sibelius Concerto, I believe, also with Kang, that you can get also on Naxos. But this is the one I have. It's a fine performance. It's on the swifter side, which I like, actually. swifter side all around. Leaper is not always the most gripping of conductors, but he certainly follows the soloist extremely well, and Kang plays extremely well. And the Polish orchestra is nice to hear. It's good to hear other orchestras do this music, besides just the usual English folks. You hear other things. You hear more prominent woodwinds. You hear more prominent brass parts. Sometimes, not always. It depends on who the conductor is. And, the conductors who do the work often have usually recorded it with multiple soloists, as you're going to see. You saw already with Adrian Bolt, and you will see more of the same quite shortly. So that's worth considering. Then we have another Adrian Bolt. This is also mono. This is on Heritage. It's on Decca. It's in those Bolt Decca boxes from Eloquence and a few other places. This is Alfredo Campoli, and this is, in some ways, I think, the best of all the Adrian Bolt recordings of the work, quite frankly. It's also the quickest. And, again, it's not a question just of absolute speed, but there's a freshness to this performance. It's just beautiful. Campoli was a great violinist. Wonderful violinist. And, the first movement's 1640. The Andante is 11 and a bit. It's great that way. It just flows. It's so wonderful. And the finale, 1745. Yes, it's the way to do it. It's absolutely wonderful. You have to get used to the sonics. Let me see if this tells you what date it was recorded. I don't know if it says anything. Yeah, 1955. But it's a fine performance, and I think Bolt was in top form then. He really was. So that's really kind of cool. But you have to get used to the older sound of it. But Campoli is a violinist worth knowing. He had character. He had lots of personality. So then we have, look at this, the Halle. The Halle with Elgar. Yes, it's Halle, Elgar. These are all these. It used to be the Halle Symphony Orchestra. Then it just became the Halle, just like Nigel Kennedy just became the Kennedy. This is with Mark Elder. Most of his recordings made on this label, which is the Dazzling Halle label. Dazzling Halle. I'm not kidding you. That's what it says. And there's an Elgar edition. I haven't liked most of these performances. I don't think they're that persuasive, and I don't think that the sonics have been that good. And here you have the violin nicely embedded in the orchestral texture, which I like. I like hearing it that way once in a while. And the intelligence of the soloist is not in question. It's Thomas Zayatmeyer. He ain't British. It's wonderful. I love Zayatmeyer. He's a great, great violinist, and he turns in a very, very intelligent performance of the work. It's like the others that I've mentioned that I really like, a sense of onward movement and freshness, which is very compelling. It's not quite like any other performance. It's not on the quicker side always. The slow movement is 12:31. The finale is 18:30. It's all standard tempos, you might want to say, for the work. But, it's so lively, and you really do hear some fabulous give and take with the orchestra, and the sonics are some of the better coming from this source. You also get the Prelude from the Kingdom and the Dream of Gerontius, the Prelude and Angel's Farewell in Elgar's own arrangement without the chorus. And if you want that, more power to you. So Zayatmeyer is definitely worth considering. Then we've got, this is totally hot. This is, Nikolai Znaider. Now, the Russian school hasn't picked up on the Elgar Concerto particularly, because it ain't very Russian, and you don't get to slobber all over it like you would Tchaikovsky. But heck, if you could do the Shostakovich or the Prokofiev concertos, why not do the Elgar Concerto? He's terrific. Oh my goodness, he's wonderful. And you've got the Staatskapelle Dresden with its phenomenal transparency of texture always, with a nice firm bass line. It's great, conducted by Colin Davis, who has done quite a few of these. Really quite a few. This is one of the great modern recordings of the piece. I have no doubt about it. It's absolutely marvelous. Marvelous. So on RCA, by the way. Now here's one that I know I'm moving through these things quickly, but this is getting to be a rather long chat, isn't it? When you have to do 24 performances or recordings, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 8 or 9 to go. Yeah. Here's one you probably haven't heard of, but it's worth listening to. It's let's see, with Trin Rubel violin and the Estonian National Symphony Orchestra under Niimi Järvi. Now, this really interested me. It really did. Here she is, looking kind of unhappy, but she shouldn't be because she plays very, very well. This is a remarkable performance in many ways. It's extremely free in tempo because, Järvi's a quick guy. I kind of expect him to race through it, and he really rips into the piece as it starts. It's da 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 da. It really moves, But then the violin comes in, and she's in charge, and he's really considerate of her. And it goes quickly, and it goes slowly, but not in a bad way. We're going to hear about it in a bad way. Next one up, you'll see what I mean. But it's got just an enormous amount of improvisatory freedom that's just beautiful. I mean, the tempos are normal tempos for the work. But within the work, this is the performance where you're going to hear some of the possibilities of contrast by having large sections having their own character, but it all hangs together. The sonics place the soloist, Miss Rubel, well within the orchestra. So there's a lot of dialogue back and forth. Now, some people might just want a bigger, more fulsome violin tone. And, again, some people have very strong preferences when it comes to violin music that way. I don't. I like to hear differences. As long as the performance has personality, there's personality where the violinist is in your face, and there's personality in terms of interaction between the violin and the other instruments. You take your choice. And I find it fascinating to hear it both ways. This is on, what label is this? It's the Sorrel. It doesn't say. The coupling's very interesting. It's Stenhammer's Two Sentimental Romances, which makes for some unique other music. And it was recorded in 2017. And I wish I could figure out. Is that a label? Sorrel. Yeah, the label is Sorrel. Which I don't know what else they've done, but here it is. It may be that Miss Rubel or however you pronounce her name, had some people willing to pay for the recording and release it. I don't know. All I know is that it's a really good Elgar Violin Concerto, one that's different from all the others, and that's what makes it so interesting for me, and different in a good way. I don't like difference for its own sake. And, every performance is different from every other performance. That's a generic observation. But this has got differences that matter. So there you go. Very, very good. Next, Hilary Hahn. Before we get to Hilary Hahn, I was going to tell you about a performance that doesn't quite cut it. This one that just came out, Simon Rattle, big surprise, and Renaud Capuçon, violinist. It's coupled with a very fine performance of the violin sonata with Stephen Huff on the piano. But I find Capuçon's career to be a puzzle. I don't think he has much distinctive personality as a soloist. Most recently, when I heard him do the Franck Sonata, I thought it was just horrible, absolutely awful. And Rattle, it's a push me, pull you performance. It's a performance that shows how you use rubato and fluctuations in tempo, not in a good way. Because as soon as it gets going, it slows down. And then it speeds up, and then it slows down, and then it speeds up, and then it slows down. Almost within the phrase, not within sections or within larger paragraphs that have their own character. It's all happening on a very small scale. And that gives the music, first of all, a monotonous sense of predictability. I mean, loud is fast, soft is slow. Loud is fast, soft is slow. It's that kind of thing. I mean, I'm exaggerating for the sake of the point. Of course, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. It's with the London Symphony. I mean, they all know what they're doing. It's on Erato, But I find it to be one of the least persuasive modern versions of the piece. I really, really do. And I'm so sorry about that. What can I say? It's one of the less best. Then we've got Hilary Hahn. Here we go. Hilary Hahn, who can play the pants off of anything. And she does here. This is coupled with Vaughan Williams, The Lark Ascending. A very nice coupling with Colin Davis, once again, and the London Symphony Orchestra on Deutsche Grammophon. Hilary Hahn plays this absolutely beautifully. This is one of the liveliest, freshest, most revivifying performances that I've heard. And she does a fabulous cadenza in the finale. It's not like all quick, but it has it has this sense of like inner light. I don't know how else to describe it. She doesn't have the biggest tone. It the balances are pretty fair between the violin and the orchestra, so she's not up front and in your face, but she dominates the orchestra where she needs to. She really does. And the orchestra sounds great, and Colin Davis, of course, knows the work quite well, as we've already seen with Mr. Snyder. So, yeah, I mean, this is pretty terrific. It really is. It's absolutely first class, and it's, 49 minutes and 43 seconds. So we're right where it ought to be. Hilary Hahn is a great, great artist. No question about it in my mind. She has character. She has rhythm in a violinist yet. It's great. It's absolutely great. So yeah, that was so much fun. Then we've got another of the less best. I was rooting for it. I wanted it to be wonderful. I did so badly. It was this one with the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic under Carlos Miguel Prieto with violinist Ning Feng on Channel Classics. It's coupled, interestingly, with the sort of Finzi Violin Concerto. It's a sort of sporadic work. It was it not complete or not fully worked out or something? It's very short. It's like 17 minutes. And it's interesting to have that. But the Elgar is the main thing, and this is just a flabby, dull performance. That's all I can say. It sounds cautious. It lacks punch and drive and accent, and it's just not good. It's very warmly recorded. Channel Classics makes gorgeous sounding records always, but it's not competitive with the best, not by a mile, just so you're aware. That's that one. Now we're up to our top 5. Are you ready? Here are my top 5. Let's see, what are they? Ah, yes, for sure. James Ennis, another one of the great violinists out there today. He's fabulous. There's anything he can't do. And he makes everything sound artful and attractive and expressive, and his tone is lovely, and it's just a wonderful performance. Andrew Davis is the conductor, who's also done a couple of these, I think. We may get some more of those as we proceed. And this has the Serenade for Strings. It's with the Philharmonia. It's on the Onyx label, and it's first class. It's absolutely first class. I think the timings are just about perfect. It's 1736, 1222, 1854. Hike! You know what I mean. Right? It's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I don't have anything, particularly extreme to say about it, other than that he never sets a foot wrong, number one. And number two, this has about the most cogent performance of the first movement that I've ever heard. I mean, it actually sounds, for 17 minutes and 36 seconds, too short. I mean, when it's over, you're like, whoa, that went fast. And you're not even conscious of where the time's going. It's that kind of performance. It has that wonderful sense of inevitability, which is very hard to achieve in this music. It really is. And so it's a glorious performance, and I recommend it quite highly. So there's that. Next, Gil Shaham. Everything he does is just about fabulous now, and this was on his own label, Nightingale. 48 minutes and 28 seconds, no coupling. David Zinman is the conductor with the Chicago Symphony. Zinman is a very fine Elgar conductor. Remember the Enigma variations he did in Baltimore that got a rosette from the Penguin Guide. You could have knocked me over with a pin. And this is, again, as good as anything out there. It's so smart and well-paced. And Zinman is the perfect accompanist to let, Shaham sort of takes the center stage. Zinman is by no means a shrinking violet in this work, nor is the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. But he really creates a framework that lets Shaham just explore the inner sanctum of the work. Doesn't that sound poetic? I'm trying to find interesting things to say about all these performances. It's not easy when you have 24 performances. So give me some indulgence here. It's great. I don't know if you can still find it. I mean, these things come and go on Shaham's label, Canary Classics. Did I say Nightingale or something? I don't know. Something? I said something stupid. It's Canary Classics. That's the label. I got it confused with Nightingale, which was Edita Gruberova's label. So, give me a break. It's all the bird labels. I don't know. This is Canary Classics. If you can find it, grab it. It's marvelous. If you can't, well, we're stuck. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. but this is really first class. I don't understand why it wasn't. I was looking for it recently. For all of these, I check Amazon and whatnot, and I saw it, but at like a crazy price. So, Gil, if you're listening, make sure this is available at like normal price, whatever it is. It should be available. It's a wonderful tribute to your artistry. It really is. So, okay. Next up, another performance you would be remiss to overlook. Another fantastic lady violinist, Rachel Barton Pine, this time with the BBC Symphony Orchestra under Andrew Litton. It's on the Avi label, and the coupling is the Bruch Concerto, which we certainly don't need another version of, but it's a very generous coupling. You might think that because of that, the performance of the violin, the Elgar, is going to be too quick. It's not a bit. And I have to say, fine as Barton Pine is, and she is amazing, Andrew Litton is equally so. This is one of the most exciting versions of the orchestral accompaniment. I mean, here's a performance where the orchestra has its own assertive personality. And that gives Barton Pine so much to work with, to really let her own character contrast with what we hear in the orchestra, especially at the climaxes, which are really huge. It's terrific. It's just a wonderful vision of the piece. Like Hilary Hahn and some of the other Nicola Benedetti and Nikolai Znaider and, Gil Shaham, the modern crew of younger-ish violinists. It's a very fresh performance. It sounds like they're discovering it anew. And I think the very positive orchestral accompaniments have something to do with it. I think the international character of the soloists has something to do with it. I think there's a freedom, a sense of real sense of discovery in the music that, I don't hear in some of the older, more traditionally acclaimed performances coming out of the UK. Not that they're bad. They aren't. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there's a tradition of playing the music, and then there's other ways of looking at it and coming to it. And I get that feeling of wow, this is something really special in this performance. So it's on a VAV. If you'll get another Bruch recording, I mean, how many of those do we need? I've reviewed so many recordings now that have the Bruch as an accompaniment to something interesting, like Gert Veit or, Florence Price. I mean, it doesn't mean, of course, that the Bruch isn't a wonderful work. It is, but my goodness, it sort of deserves not to be the second fiddle, such, pardon the pun there, to other works of greater, at least rarity or size or something else. Anyway, never mind, I'm blabbing. Rachel Barton Pine is first class, and the sonics are just great. You really, really should hear it. Next, oh yeah, fantastic. Nicola Benedetti, fantastic British pianist. This is, I was surprised. I had no expectations for this whatsoever. Not because she's not a fine violinist, she is, but I didn't expect it to be this characterful, this vivid. This is a real punchy, in-your-face, pedal-to-the-metal performance. Vladimir Yarovsky is the conductor, and he's great with the London Phil. It's on Decade. You get Elgar's short, sniggly bits, Sospiri, Salut d'amour, and the Chanson de nuit as the couplings. This is 47 minutes and 46 seconds, so it's a little bit, tiny bit on the quickish side, which is great. And she just attacks the bloody thing. This is a recording where the violinist is sort of up front and in your face. Not that the orchestra is inaudible in any way. It's not. It really isn't. But she's the star, and she takes advantage. And the performance has a lot of, sort of an old-fashioned feel in a good way. That is, she uses portamento. She has a very wide range of vibrato. She sobs when the music sobs. I mean, it's a very heart-on-sleeve expressive performance of the kind that Elgar had in mind when he described the work, I think. And I was thrilled to hear this. I really was. She does a bang-up job with it. And the accompaniment is great and good for her. She's just wonderful. It's fabulous to see all these terrific female violinists attacking this piece. Because, again, it was one of those things that, the standard press was not going to be so receptive to having female soloists in this work. And Ida Handel, who was maybe the earliest lady to do it, or one of them anyway, her performance is so idiosyncratic that, it's hard to say, but she takes on everybody and pulls no punches, and I just loved it. It was fun. and it's on Decca, and it's readily available. And so I would give it a listen. I really would. Next, the second Zuckerman. Now, this is with Slatkin in St. Louis, and I think it's just sensational. Zuckerman has a very, very personal approach to the work. For example, at the beginning of the finale, which sounds sort of like an etude, it's he takes it rather slowly compared to other soloists, and he really articulates. He wants you to hear it as a theme, as something that has thematic substance. He doesn't just fly through it. And Slatkin is a fabulous Elgar conductor. I mean, his Elgar recordings in this box, it's in this little boxlet. You get the 2 symphonies, the Serenade in the South, the cello concerto, Froissart, Coquin, the Enigma. Slatkin himself has said that he was not too fond of this performance of Enigma, at least as he told me. I think it's marvelous, but he'd like to do it again and speed it up a bit. It doesn't matter. He was a wonderfully responsive conductor. At St. Louis, which was his orchestra, they just work like a key in a lock. And Zuckerman has this, at this point anyway in his career, this gorgeous, dusky, I said before, this sort of dusky, sultry tone. It's so characterful. It sounds like a person. That's the point. And you really hear it. And in the cadenza, the cadenza with all the soft variety of tone color that accompanies the violin. Slatkin makes sure that we hear it. Zuckerman allows us to hear it. He recedes when he needs to and lets us savor all of the luscious combinations that Elgar works out in the piece. It's gorgeously recorded. The balances are fabulous. It's just a wonderful, wonderful performance. Very underrated. You'll seldom hear people talk about it, and I think that's just a crime, because it's one of the best. However, we finally come to the end. However, my recording, which has been for quite some time, and remains so, is this one. Yitzhak Perlman, Barenboim, Chicago. Nobody English, although Barenboim sort of is by adoption. But, here's the thing. I wanted a recording that combined the technical assurance and positive personality of a Heifetz type character with amazing orchestral playing and a conductor who really knew his way around the piece. I mean, how are you going to do better than this? You've got Barenboim, who's already recorded the work, who knows it cold. It's just terrific. You've got Chicago, which is amazing, absolutely fantastic. And you've got Perlman, who gets so much, condescension because he's such an obvious virtuoso who revels in what he does or what he did. And I have no problem with that, because as long as the music is first and foremost, which it always is when he plays, and it certainly is here, then we're in good shape. And this is a very well-balanced recording. This isn't one where, it's violin up front and everybody else way, way in the back, as you heard, for example, in some of his EMI recordings of like the Sibelius Concerto with Previn or something like that. It isn't like that. It's really sensitive to the mechanics of how the music is supposed to sound, but boy, is it exciting, and it's brilliant, and it's passionate, and it's intense, and it flows like crazy. It's 47 minutes and 14 seconds. It's not too fast. It's not too slow. It's coupled with a glorious chanson poème, which is a really wonderful piece to go with it, by the way. I mean, I don't see this coupled very often, with the Elgar, but what a great idea, because they're both basically very inward, sensitive pieces. And, it's amazing to hear an outward type violinist like Perlman, a showman, if you will, really, 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 really dig into the intimacy, the subtlety of the work. Because he's got the chops for it. He's got the smarts for it. And it's about time people listen and acknowledge that. You have to say what you hear. That's what I hear when I listen to this. It's on DG. It's amazing. It's still fabulous. So that's my choice. But like I said, and now we finally got to the end, almost all of these will do you. And so you have many, many choices depending on your preferences as regards orchestral balance, the sonority of the violinist, the character of the conductor, your view of orchestral, standards in Kazakhstan. You have many ways to come up with your own perfect formula to find the ideal Elgar violin concerto, but this is most, if not all of them. And I hope it helps you, it helps to guide you in making your selection. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.